Do not mistake the trap for the prize. Beauty is but the polished surface of a blind will to reproduce. The moment you see the mechanism, the charm dissolves into transparency, and transparency cannot hold a prisoner. Arthur Schopenhauer. Have you ever stopped to observe, with surgical coldness, what actually happens the exact moment a man falls in love? Arthur Schopenhauer, perhaps the most lucid and merciless philosopher to ever walk the earth, said that all love, without exception, is an illusion masterfully created by nature, not to ensure your happiness, but solely and exclusively to ensure the survival of the species. Behind every affectionate gesture, every passionate sigh, and every promise of eternity, there exists an invisible calculation, a cold and mathematical impulse to perpetuate life, whatever the cost to your individual freedom. He categorically stated that romantic love is the most sophisticated trap ever invented, a biological trick designed to blind the rational man, transform him into an obedient servant, and make him kneel before an ideal that, in practice, never existed. But listen carefully, because here the conversation gets dangerous, and most would turn off the video. When Schopenhauer dissected female behavior, he did not do so with hatred or bitterness, but with a cutting lucidity that few men can endure without looking away. He observed women as a biologist observes a storm or a predator in the jungle, without moralism, without cheap sentimentality, only with eyes of pure analysis. For him, the fatal error of men, the tragic flaw of our psychology, is believing that women are angels or beings of light, when in truth they are the direct and most efficient representatives of the will to life. They embody that blind and irrational principle that only wants to continue existing, pushing the species forward no matter the price you pay for it. It is exactly for this reason that there is a veiled silence, a kind of tacit agreement in society, so that you never learn this. Because a man who understands the mechanism, who takes apart the watch and sees the gears, instantly loses the charm of manipulation. He becomes immune. He sees the game from above the board, and whoever sees the game with such clarity can no longer be played. The woman, according to Schopenhauer, possesses a natural ability, almost supernatural, to disguise her real intentions. And understand, this does not happen because she is intrinsically evil or perverse, but because nature programmed her with this survival software. She needs to generate security, protection, and continuous interest for her offspring and for herself. And to achieve this goal, she becomes a perfect actress on the stage of life. Think about the last time you were seduced. That smile was not just a smile, it was a mask. That deep look was a calculated trap. The sweetness in the voice was a survival strategy refined by millennia of evolution. They learned from very early on, long before us, that true power does not reside in physical strength, muscles, or violence, but in absolute psychological influence. Schopenhauer saw the woman as the mirror of the will, the vital impulse disguised as romance. He said that man sacrifices himself, works, fights wars, and builds empires for her because he piously believes he is serving love, when in truth he is only serving nature, being an unpaid employee of evolution. Love is the disguise of instinct. Passion is chemical hypnosis. And marriage? Marriage is the cell where the prisoner enters smiling, thanking the jailer. A man in love is a lobotomized man. He loses clarity, logic, and the sense of danger. He idealizes, he transfers to the woman in front of him everything he would like her to be, projecting his needs onto her, and falls in love with the projection, with a mental hologram, never with the real person of flesh and bone. That is why the end of the enchantment is so devastating. When the fog dissipates, despair comes. He did not lose the woman. He lost his own reflection, the perfect image he created, and that has now shattered on the floor of reality. The woman perceives this intuitively. She knows you are projecting and plays with it. She feeds your illusion, puts wood on the fire of your fantasy, because it is from this illusion that her control over you is born.
The woman does not conquer through the naked and raw truth. She conquers through mystery, through shadows. It is what is not said that traps the man. It is the white space that his mind tries to fill. It is the ambiguous look, the calculated absence of quick answers, the smile that promises heaven and refuses earth at the same time. Schopenhauer said that man becomes a slave to his own desire, and the woman dominates precisely because she positions herself as the exclusive object of that desire. Therefore, she does not want you to awaken. She is terrified of your awakening, because an awakened man sees the existential void behind the colorful charm. He no longer kneels before beauty, because he understands that beauty is only the polished surface of a reproductive instinct. He no longer bows to charm, because he knows that charm is merely a tool, like a hammer or a screwdriver. He does not promise what he should not, nor seek what does not exist. And such a man is dangerous to the system, because he is free. Women, instinctively, will always prefer the man who dreams to the man who sees. The dreamer is moldable, manipulable, full of foolish hopes, and easy to lead. The awakened one, on the other hand, is cold, lucid, unshakable. He does not react to the emotional game. He observes, and nothing, absolutely nothing, terrifies a woman more than being observed with clinical clarity, without the filter of adoration. Schopenhauer believed that the woman represents the cycle, the eternal return, the monotonous repetition of biological life. The man who understands this transcends the cycle. He stops searching for the ideal woman and begins to search for himself, the only conquest that really matters. He comprehends that true power lies not in being loved, applauded, or validated, but in not needing love to breathe. He understands that freedom does not come from conquest, but from renunciation. It is for this reason that women do not want you to learn this, because love for them is the battlefield where they reign supreme. And the man who understands the laws of physics of this battlefield no longer kneels. He can love, yes, but in another way, without illusions, without dependency, without fear of losing. He loves with consciousness, and consciousness is the acid that corrodes the spell. Schopenhauer said that man only finds peace
when desire ceases, when the engine of the will turns off. And love disguised as beauty is the most sophisticated, addictive, and dangerous form of desire. Therefore, while man chases the feminine ideal, he remains a captive, a hamster on the wheel. When he finally wakes up, he realizes that romantic love is just a thin veil over animal instinct, and that behind the sweetness, there is only the blind will of nature trying to perpetuate itself through his body and his resources. A lucid man does not hate women. Hatred is still a form of attachment. He understands them, and by understanding, he frees himself. The brutal truth is that the awakened man begins to see love as a form of collective hypnosis, a shared hallucination. He observes how the whole world revolves around this empty promise of finding the right person, how movies, songs, books, and mass culture feed the childish fantasy that happiness is in someone out there, never in oneself. Schopenhauer said that this external search is the greatest illusion of the modern world. Humanity lives fascinated by the reflection of a desire that is never fulfilled, and the more it runs after it, the more it loses itself from its own essence. The woman, conscious or not of this process, dominates this game because she was born inside it. She was forged in it. Since the beginning of civilization, her survival depended on the ability to attract, captivate, and hold male attention. She learned to use emotion as a weapon of war. And the man, with his idealistic and naive nature, became easy prey. He wants to believe in the fable. He wants to surrender. He wants to be the hero who saves someone. And it is exactly this yearning to be the hero, the savior, that condemns him to servitude. Schopenhauer saw love as a farce of the will, a puppet theater where the impulse to perpetuate the species pulls the strings. The woman is the vehicle of this will, the man the disposable instrument. He falls in love believing he is making a free choice, but in truth, he was already chosen by biology before even opening his mouth. Nature speaks through him, using his mind as a marionette. And when he wakes up and realizes the deception, it is generally too late. The marriage, the children, the mortgages, the social obligations have trapped him in a web of steel. The cycle has closed. That is why he said that the woman represents the eternal present, the materialist now of life. The man, on the other hand, represents transcendence, the intellectual effort to escape this repetitive cycle. While she seeks instinct and security, he seeks meaning and reason. This fundamental difference makes love a field of silent war. While she desires material and emotional security, he desires existential freedom. When the man begins to see love without the veil of illusion, he realizes that the greatest feminine strength is not in physical beauty, which decays with time, but in the ability to control the male imaginary. The woman does not need to say anything. It is enough that the man imagines. He projects onto her his hopes, his fears, his most archaic desires. She becomes a mirror of his unconscious, and it is in this narcissistic reflection that he drowns. The power of the woman is the power of appearance, of Maya. She knows that the man does not love what he sees. He loves what he believes he sees. So, she molds herself. She transforms into the symbol he desires. She changes her voice, her behavior, her look, not necessarily to deceive him maliciously, but because nature speaks for her, adapting her for the conquest. Beauty is the disguise of the will. Charm is the instrument of instinct, and love is the poetic name that man gives to his own blindness. Schopenhauer said that the man who understands this does not hate, but withdraws. He retreats. He begins to love silence, solitude, contemplation, because in these things there is no lie, there is no performance. Silence does not manipulate him. Solitude demands nothing of him. It is in isolation that man reconciles with the truth, and this truth is brutal but liberating. Romantic love does not liberate, it imprisons. The woman, in turn, feels instinctively like an animal feels a change in the weather when the man sees the game. It is for this reason that she deeply fears the cold, introspective, distant man. Not the coldness of contempt, which is still a reaction, but the coldness of lucidity. His gaze no longer gets lost in hers. It does not let itself be led. He does not react to charm, does not seek approval like a boy. This man is like an inverted mirror. He returns to the woman her own image, without adornments, without romantic idealizations. And this destroys her ego. The woman does not want you to learn this, because if you learn, she loses the power of illusion. And illusion is the currency of her kingdom. Without the illusion, the game ends, the romance dies, the passion unravels like smoke, the enchantment becomes transparency. And in transparency, there is no more conquest, only raw consciousness. Schopenhauer stated that the duty of the superior man is to transcend the will. And transcending the will means no longer letting oneself be moved like a leaf in the wind by desire. A man who does not desire is a man who cannot be bought. He can love, but love does not dominate him. He can feel attraction, but attraction does not drag him by the nose. He lives in balance between the flesh and the spirit, between the animal impulse and divine reason. The woman, on the other hand, is the impulse in human form. She represents the magnetism of life, the constant invitation to forget oneself. And the man, when he yields, forgets who he is. That is what nature wants, that he loses himself, that he merges into desire, that he returns to the infinite cycle of reproduction and the struggle for survival. But the awakened man becomes an anomaly in the system, an error in the matrix. He does not reproduce blindly, does not bow to the demands of instinct, does not let himself be governed by enchantment. He observes, and by observing, he destroys the spell. That is why Schopenhauer is so hated and feared. He rips the mask off love with violence. He shows the theater of nature and reveals the ridiculous role that man plays without knowing. And women, those who understand the danger of this thought, despise him because they feel the threat. He reveals the magician's trick. He shows the mechanism behind the curtain. He teaches the man not to need them. And when the man no longer needs, the empire collapses. The man who wakes up from this hypnosis begins to perceive the total inversion of social roles. He sees that, for centuries, social discourse made him believe he was the dominant sex. But in truth, he was always dominated by what he desired. The woman never needed brute force to govern the men. His desire was enough. True power lies not in commanding. It lies in being the reason why someone acts. And at this point, the woman has always won.
Schopenhauer said that while man builds temples, empires, and complex philosophical systems, it is the face of a woman that makes him move mountains. He fights bloody wars and writes immortal poems, but what motivates all this is a look, a touch, a body. The rational man bows before instinct, and that is why he suffers, because he believes he is free while obeying nature's leash. The woman understands the market value of this. She does not seek to be understood in her complexity. She seeks to be desired. It is desire that ensures her power over you. Therefore, she transforms into a symbol, an archetype, an insoluble mystery. She is everyone and no one at the same time. She can be pure and profane, distant and accessible, docile and cruel. The man tries to decipher her, tries to solve the enigma, and it is in this effort that he loses himself. For while he tries to understand, he has already fallen into the trap. Schopenhauer saw in this the cruelest of human deceptions. The man believes he is loving a woman, an individual, but he is worshipping the impersonal principle of life. The same principle that keeps him tied to pain, to need, to the infinite repetition of insatiable desire. The woman is the portal through which man returns to the world of the will, and the price of admission is always the same: his freedom. Therefore, the philosopher said that the wise man does not let himself be dragged by the current. He contemplates the river, but does not enter it. He touches the world with his eyes, but does not surrender to the hands of the flesh. He observes feminine beauty as a reflection of the whole, a work of art of nature, but not as a personal promise of happiness. Because he understands that behind every angelic face, there is the same imperative call: serve life, perpetuate pain, continue the species. And that is why, my friend, women do not want you to learn this. Because a man who understands Schopenhauer is a man who can no longer be led by the nose. He can feel love, but love does not blind him. He can feel desire, but desire does not dominate him. He becomes a sober observer at a party of sleepwalkers. And what is more frightening to the system of love than a man who simply does not react to the enchantment? The feminine world feeds on the masculine response, on the look that admires, on the gesture that offers everything, on the sacrifice that promises the world. The man who does not move, who only observes in silence, destroys the entire theater. Without an audience applauding, the actress loses power. The woman perceives this quickly in the first meeting. She gets uneasy before the man who is not dazzled, because he does not enter the emotional plot she wrote. He does not give space for drama, does not offer the fuel of emotional reaction. He is like a rock in the middle of a storm of gestures and insinuations. And the more she tries to provoke him, test him, shake him, the more he reveals the emptiness of her game. Schopenhauer called this the serenity of the disenchanted. The man who has seen the truth does not need to flee to a cave. He just crosses the world with an unbreakable inner distance. He can live among people, work, love, converse, but inside him there is a silence, an impregnable fortress. And this silence is pure power. The common man is a slave to the cycle, the promise, the incessant search, the painful loss. The awakened man is free even within desire. He does not blame himself for desiring, as he knows he is human, but he also does not destroy himself for it. He understands that every impulse is just a wave of the will, a force that comes, breaks on the beach, and goes away. And behind that wave, there is something greater: consciousness. Women do not want the man to discover this, because the entire emotional and social structure depends on him believing that love is everything, that he fights for love, suffers for love, and dies for love. But when he understands that romantic love is just the golden surface of a biological mechanism, he frees himself from the chains. And the world calls him cold, insensitive, cruel, simply because he stopped kneeling before the illusion. This man does not hate women, but he also does not idealize them. He sees them as part of nature, beautiful, intense, necessary, but not divine. He does not put them on a pedestal, nor reduce them to nothing. He just sees what is. And seeing is the greatest power that exists. Schopenhauer said that love is an illusion that only sustains itself while the man believes that the woman is something more than she really is. When he realizes that she is just a manifestation of the will, a means and not an end, he crosses the veil of Maya. And on the other side of the veil, what remains is peace. This peace is what the world fears.
Because a man at peace cannot be controlled by marketing, by society, or by women. He does not need to chase anyone, does not need to prove anything, does not need to compete with other males. He is whole. And when a man is whole, the feminine world, often based on strategies of seduction through lack, loses dominance. That is why women do not want you to read Schopenhauer, because he does not teach you to hate them. He teaches you to see them with crystal clarity. And seeing
is the same as breaking the charm. When the man wakes up, the whole world starts to look like a big, poorly staged theater. He observes couples in the streets fighting and kissing, hears empty promises in radio songs, sees vows of eternal love in movies, and realizes that everything revolves around the same ancient spell. The illusion that there is completeness outside oneself, that someone will come to heal one's emptiness, that love is the final redemption. Schopenhauer said that this belief is the root of all human suffering, seeking in the transitory appearance what can only be found in eternal consciousness. The man who understands this does not become cold, but becomes integral. He stops looking for half oranges because he understands that he was never a half. He was always a complete circle. He begins to perceive that romantic love is just one of the many forms nature uses to keep him turning on the wheel of desire, and that this wheel never stops. It only changes faces. The woman, as the most visible expression of the will, is the guardian of this cycle. She embodies the power of life, the magnetism of instinct, the promise of continuity. That is why she fascinates, hypnotizes, and disarms. The man who looks at her with innocence falls into the hole. The one who looks at her with consciousness rises and passes over. But of course, this awakening is not welcome. The entire society feeds on the man who dreams, the man who consumes gifts, dinners, and trips, who promises the future, who suffers, who chases. He is predictable, a useful piece in the gear. The lucid man is unpredictable and therefore dangerous to the status quo. He does not spend vital energy trying to be loved, does not beg for crumbs of attention, does not disintegrate from rejection. He is calm, centered, mysterious. And this tranquility destroys the power of seduction because it reveals what is behind it: fear. The feminine fear of indifference is ancestral because the woman knows at some deep level that her power is born from the reflection in the man's eye. If the man does not react, she ceases to exist as a symbol of power. Therefore, she fears the neutral gaze, the gaze that does not get lost, that does not desire, that does not bend. This gaze is like a mirror that returns the truth without filters. Schopenhauer said that the woman desires to be loved, not understood, because love is the territory of chaotic emotion, and understanding is the territory of the ordered mind. And when the man understands, he stops feeling as before. He loves with lucidity, and lucid love does not bow to whims. He observes. The man who learns this begins to walk in silence through life. He does not need to defend himself, does not need to prove intellectual superiority. He just carries the silent consciousness that the game is ancient and that the only real way out is not to play. He can relate, can love, can touch life, but without losing himself
inside it. He is the spectator of his own desire, watching the movie without thinking he is the character. Women do not want you to learn this, because when you learn, the magnetic pole changes. The power changes place. The power becomes internal. The magnetism inverts. Now it is she who tries to understand you, to decipher your silence. It is she who wonders what you feel, what you want, what you hide behind that calm. The lucid man becomes a dark mirror. The more they observe him, the less they can see him. And that is where the true dominion lies. Not in external tyrannical control, but in absolute internal serenity. The woman dominates the man who seeks approval, but the man who seeks himself dominates his own world. He does not need feminine admiration to feel like a man, because he has already conquered the hardest look of all, the look upon himself. Schopenhauer believed that human suffering is born from the illusion of separation, from the belief that we need another to be complete. But the man who understands the game stops begging for love and begins to radiate presence. He no longer needs to chase the feminine outside of him, because he has already integrated the feminine principle within himself. Mystery, intuition, sensitivity. He stops seeing the woman as an object of salvation and recognizes her only as a reflection of nature. And in this integration, desire loses the power to drag him into the abyss.
The woman feels this immediately in her skin. The man who knows himself intimidates not by arrogance, but by unshakable peace. He does not need the conquest, and precisely because of that, he is the hardest to conquer. He does not play, does not lie, does not promise the impossible. He is whole, and the whole is irresistible, but also impossible to dominate. Women do not want you to learn this, because conscious love kills the unconscious game. The awakened man sees beauty without enslaving himself to it. He feels pleasure without being its hostage. He loves without losing his gravitational axis. He is not cynical, he is awakened, and the awakened one is free. The world fears the free man because it cannot buy him, nor manipulate him with guilt, desire, or the promise of sex. He is silent like a monk and implacable like a clean mirror. The woman who approaches him realizes that the charm does not move him, that the compliment does not deceive him, that the body does not control him. She feels him present, but untouchable, like a distant mountain. And it is at this point that the relationship changes shape. The lucid man no longer kneels, but also does not despise. He looks at the woman with respect, as part of the totality, not as a prize to be won or a threat to be avoided. He understands that she represents the power of life, and he the power of consciousness. And when life and consciousness meet without masks, there is real equilibrium. But as long as the man continues to be blind, the game will continue to be rigged, and the feminine world will continue to reign over the emotional fragility of those who do not know themselves. That is why Schopenhauer said that the true masculine awakening is not hatred, it is profound understanding. When the man understands the woman's role in nature, he stops blaming and begins to observe. He realizes that nature acts through her, and that resisting the game is not fighting against the woman, but against the very instinct programmed in his DNA. The man who learns this does not become an enemy of love. He just purifies it of illusions. Love ceases to be a desperate search and becomes tranquil presence. It ceases to be need and becomes consciousness. And the conscious man does not fear solitude because he knows that in it lives the silence of those who have awakened. And that silence, my dear, that silence is what women fear most.